This is Julie Ann and the House of Influence podcast. And today I have got Rick Miners with me. He is calling in from Vancouver Island, I believe. Rick, is that correct?
Calling in from Vancouver, BC, close to Vancouver Island, yes.
I was just speaking to Lila. She was on Vancouver Island. So I was like,
Right.
is Rick in a Vancouver Island?
Pretty
Right,
close, pretty
Vancouver.
close.
Pretty
Yeah,
close, pretty close, pretty
yes.
close. And Rick joined us actually remotely when we were doing the book retreat with Jennifer Nagel. We had a total of 8 therapists / coaches that were coming together to write a book on the theme of reciprocal healing. So when a therapist or a counselor or a coach is giving therapy to a client, what is the benefit to the therapist, to the coach? And so that is really the focus of this book. And we had some amazing stories that came out as a result, including Rick. And so we're going to talk in this episode a little bit about Rick's story. But first of all, Rick, tell us about you.
Well, I work as a clinical psychologist, and I have worked with a variety of different age groups, children, adolescents, adults, providing a variety of different approaches to therapy and also assessments. And one of the areas that I have worked in is with Indigenous populations, where we are bringing together a variety of different approaches, including Indigenous ancestral ways of healing, integrating Western therapeutic modalities, and also supporting Indigenous people as they work with their sacred ancestral plant medicines.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Now we went quite deep when we were here in when we had the group together, and you were actually on Zoom remote. It didn't stop you from really digging deep into your story. We spent quite a lot of time talking about all the different layers of ancestral healing. Give us a little overview as to what you wrote about in your chapter.
Well, my chapter is about my journey into, I would say, the depths of who I am. At what level do I truly resonate with different approaches to healing? My chapter really has to do with a series of remarkable experiences that I had that only affirmed more with each passing event, that there is something that seems to lie beyond my everyday existence, and that lies beyond how I have typically shown up in the various different roles of my life. There was something about what I was receiving from Indigenous communities, and in particular, some of the different leaders or chiefs or healers, that they were seeing something within me that I was only beginning to come to terms with within myself. And there was some hesitation within me to actually accept or acknowledge what I was beginning to come into contact with. Over this period of many years and contact with Indigenous communities who were very generous in sharing some of their Indigenous ancestral ways, I began to, it seemed like, make contact with the presence of something which, in retrospect, seems like it was the presence of an old Indigenous man who would show up in times when I was inspired, open, and prepared, I suppose, to receive such a presence to come into me. And so over a number of these different events, different leaders have acknowledged that they sense or see something which has often come through song, and sometimes it's simply seen by a healer, such as somebody saying that they see the old man who was following me. And
Mhm.
so these kinds of events have just accumulated and really opened my eyes to the possibility that there might be something quite a bit deeper, previously unfathomable, that I'm coming into contact with.
You know, it's so interesting because I was just speaking to Lila, and we were talking about intergenerational trauma. And I think, you know, something that you're talking about is that ancestral, I don't want to use the word trauma, but that an ancestral knowledge, you know, that is kind of deep inside you, and it is reflected back by other people. So, you know, maybe it was so buried that, you know, you needed someone to hold up a mirror to actually to be able to recognize that, right? To be able to recognize your own ancestral
Mhm.
beginnings.
I think that's very true. I think that being raised in the part of culture that I was raised in and being indoctrinated in the scientific method, I had a tendency to dismiss the kinds of experiences that I was having and to disbelieve in the kind of experience that was coming knocking repeatedly. And it was exactly this various different wisdoms that I was very fortunate to hear and to receive from a variety of Indigenous elders around the world, not only here in North America, but Australia as well. And it was this growing realization that we are all Indigenous. And we are all Indigenous to this planet. I mean, how could we not be?
Yes.
And so there was this understanding that if we peeled back culture and went back in time far enough, that each and every one of us can come back into contact with our own Indigenous roots. And so it was these reflections that were these reflections or glimpses into myself and perhaps my own Indigenous roots that really excited me and guided me increasingly to dig into my ancestral past. So yeah, it's been a very exciting journey and unbelievable at times.
Now tell me, with this newfound knowledge, how do you bring that into your you know, everyday therapy practice? This is I kind of, it's almost reciprocal, right? Because these are the people that are mirroring this information back to you are the same people that you're counseling. Is that right?
Yes, in some cases, that is true. I would say that when I show up with respect of their traditions and the humility that I think is necessary to learn, it's hard to know when they're benefiting from my presence and when I'm benefiting from theirs. It just, they seem to blur together.
Yes.
I think that there are just some generally some principles and wisdoms that um, exist in the space, and various different traditions capture them in different ways using symbols and language that resonates for that particular group. And I find that one of the ways that I'm able to offer support when working with people of Indigenous descent, excuse me, is through song,
Mm.
and offering and using some of the songs that I've been granted permission to sing. And that seems to meet some of my Indigenous clients in a very deep, ancestral, and tender place that seems to help support them, that seems to provide a mirror that reflects back to them the depths of their own intergenerational roots. So those are amongst the different ways that I work with these learnings and teachings with Indigenous clients. And I also work with other clients who may be more, more broadly classified as being settler,
Mm.
by sharing some of these wisdoms and acknowledging their source, which elder shared that from which nation, and how can this be of benefit to us as we sit here today and consider the land upon which we sit,
Mhm.
and how can we weave these into more healthy ways of being in connection with ourselves, in connection with nature, and in connection with our own roots, which I believe are Indigenous.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, of course, where did we all come from in the first place?
Yeah,
Right? The first people you know, that were on this planet, you know, well, that's a big question. You know, maybe we
yeah,
shouldn't go there, because that opens up a whole new Pandora's box. But
right.
I mean, certainly in terms of our own ancestry, you know, it seems logical to me that we are all, you know, Aboriginal at some point. But it is, you know, this is not the, I'm what I love about this book, and again, I was just talking to Lila about this. This is really giving a whole new meaning to therapy, right? It's, you know, the traditional role where you thought of the therapist or the counselor or the coach was somebody who basically you know, sat there and they did not divulge any of their personal information, you know, or get involved in the conversation in any way. They were basically, you know, listening to the patient. And I know that that has created a, you know, a lot of stigma. You know, a lot of people think of, you know, going to see a therapist as a, you know, oh, you have to go see a therapist. So this approach where it's almost like this, you know, a reciprocal relationship. It's almost like, you know, going to see a family member, or, you know, like what, maybe even the old fashioned, you know, like community leaders or chieftains, people that you could go and talk to, and you know, it was more of a reciprocal relationship, right? So it's to me, this book and featuring stories like yours, it really, I believe, helps the world to look at therapy and coaching and counseling from a whole different perspective, right?
Yeah. And I think that perhaps some of what you're describing is kind of the history of the development, if you will, of Western psychology or psychiatry, and kind of that Freudian approach where a person is, you know, off to the side, either facing or toward their client or patient, or sometimes even facing away. And there's very little interaction there. And I think that, you know, things have evolved quite a lot through the decades, and perhaps even the, you know, the century since Freud and some of his colleagues developed that approach. And I think that where we're coming to increasingly at this time is the recognition of the fundamental humanity of everyone involved in the room.
Yes.
And to the extent that the therapist can attune to the deepest elements of themselves, their own core essence, and from that place extend care or create a space within which the person they're working with can resonate or attune to that deepest core essence, that facilitates or creates kind of a scaffolding for them to begin connecting with their own core essence. And in this way, we're kind of working from beneath any difficulties or symptoms or survival patterns. And so it's very much a non-pathologizing approach. It's a very human approach where we are resonating through our own shared similarities, our own shared humanity. So things have come a long ways
Oh,
since those early days.
oh, I mean, really a long way. I mean, even when I think of some of the traditional movies, you know, that have taken place, you know, in you know, the psychiatric hospitals, and you know, the way that mental illness was addressed, you know, that it was like a stigma, and it was, you know, just incredibly different to the way that it's now seen, as you say, a shared humanity, right? It's really,
Mhm.
we all have the same challenges as we go through life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for us to remember that a constellation of symptoms that we give a diagnostic name to, the name applies only to the constellation of symptoms, not to the human being that may be presenting with them. So it's not that a person is, for example, schizophrenic, but rather the person is presenting with a constellation of symptoms we call schizophrenia. But at the root, that person is still a person. And we
Yes.
can connect to our fundamental humanness given the right circumstances.
Yes, I love the way you say that, Rick. It's beautiful. I'm excited that you sharing this story and your story in this book is going to really open up the world to a different way of looking at so many things, not just therapy, but our ancestral roots and the intergenerational relationship from generation to generation. And I'm excited that we also have the platform of TEDx speaking. I'm very excited that we can take this information and we can create an opportunity for all of the authors to turn their chapters into little TEDx speaks, and then that's my dream, is that you will all have the opportunity to be able to apply for various TEDx opportunities where you can take this out to a much wider audience. And I'm very excited about that.
I'm very excited as well. And my hope is that this does go to a much wider audience. My chapter, the other chapters, with regard to my chapter, it's these are just awarenesses that are emerging, and they're coming at a time in kind of the global zeitgeist as we come increasingly into a village and the challenges that go with that, and climate, and a sense of increasing disconnection amongst people, increasing disconnection from nature, that we need to create urgently a new paradigm within which to land. And so that we can enter into a more fundamental sense of connection with ourselves, first and foremost, with those nearest and dearest to us. And of course, this planet, this beautiful blue dot on which we walk and live our lives. And I think that that's going to require a reshaping of our relationship to nature, and an honoring and a respecting of various different creatures within nature, whether it's the trees, the grass, the birds, others, the four-leggeds. And by bringing that reverence back into the conversation and into the way we think about a relationship with the earth is going to, I think, be one of the more important first steps in terms of helping to address the climate change in an urgent enough and impactful enough way. So I'm very excited for this opportunity to begin contributing to shaping how we think going forward and weaving into that our own indigeneity.
I love what you just said, Rick, because this is where sharing stories brings this ancestral knowledge, where I think there are many people that have got completely out of touch, with our environment, with our planet, and it's necessary and essential, that we reconnect with that and we really understand the significance of that. And that's where, storytelling, that's how this information was passed from generations to generations, was orally, through sharing stories around the fire. And really, we're just bringing that back, and we're hoping that technology allows us to go wider than just our tribe, that we can actually reach the world through the internet, through speaking, through podcasts like this, so that we can actually reach a much wider audience, and we can say, hey, look, you need to listen to these ancestral stories, because this is a mirror of who you are today. And so I'm delighted that you have captured all of this in your chapter, Rick, and I'm really excited. Just the stories in this book are so rich. I know you weren't actually here in Puerto Vallarta, but I think you got to really feel the other authors in the book, and all of the connections and collaborations and similarities between your co-authors, right?
Absolutely. I wish I could have been there. Circumstances didn't permit, but I could sense that there was something being woven together, a container of sorts for everyone to feel that they could dig deeply within themselves and offer up the riches that they have acquired through years of working in therapeutic relationships, that reciprocity, that which they have really derived from the people they work with. And that is definitely true for me. And in terms of bringing up this ancestral wisdom, I think that there are really many, many examples of it. Briefly, an Indigenous elder at a Sundance ceremony sharing that, well, Rick, that your ancestors used to practice the very same things that we're practicing. To my surprise, he had shared that, and I said, what do you mean? And then he shared, well, consider Stonehenge. The sacred geometries and the way that they use ritual to connect with something greater, the great beyond within themselves. So those kinds of examples exist, and we can see that they're dotted in many different places of the globe. So they were exciting, eye-opening exchanges that I had, and I really look forward to more and more of this this awakening, if you will, to our own roots, rootedness, and connection to this earth on which we walk. So thank you. It's been a very exciting journey.
Very beautifully put, Rick. Very beautifully put. And I know I'm very, very excited that we are moving forward this on different platforms, and that we're the launch on November the 6th, even if you're not able to be here in person, that you will be joining us remotely. And if not, we will, in spirit, you will still be there. So
thank you very much.
Very much looking forward to that.
I hope to at least be there remotely. Thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome. Okay, Rick, if anybody wants to get hold of you, have more information, how to work with you, where would you direct them?
I would say the first place to begin looking for me would be on LinkedIn, and you'll see me there as Rick Miners or Dr. Rick Miners. So I think that's a great way to begin dialoguing about possibilities that we can co-create, or if somebody wishes to work with me.
Beautiful. So Dr. Rick Miners on LinkedIn, and that is how you can connect with Rick, and soon to be a co-author in our book that is launching on November the 6th. Thank you so much for your time, Rick, and I'm looking forward to spending more time with you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Take care.